Chair. Without our chair here today, I will call this meeting of the Missoula Bike Ped Advisory Board for April 3rd, 2018 to order. First on the agenda is our roll call. I am Bob Wachtel, Vice Chair. On my left is Britt Arneson. To her left is Jane Schmitz and Robin Welling. To my right is Jeff Schmerker and Danny Tenenbaum. Out further is our Bike Ped Program Manager, Ben Weiss, and we have some members of the public here to present, I believe, Shane, and I'm not familiar with the other individual.
Justin Harris, HDR.
Great. Are there any changes to corrections to the minutes from the March 6th board meeting?
There was one thing, and I expect that Ben may be filling us in on that at the bottom of the first page. The question about that Robin brought up about whether bikes are allowed to go through the intersection straight if they're occupying any part of a right turn lane. And so I know you'll fill us in on that and what alternatives we might have.
Yeah, we'll talk about that when we get to the project list.
Okay, other comments, questions, corrections? Seeing none, we'll accept those minutes as presented. Any changes to the sequence of today's agenda? Okay. Moving right ahead then, we'll move into our new business, Higgins Avenue Bridge presentation. Shane and Dustin.
Okay. Switch it. All right. Thanks for having us. So I'll just put up I guess first of all, you guys all know that we have a public meeting coming up tomorrow at from 3 to 8 at the Wilma Theater. So we'll have some more details there. But the map on the screen here just kind of shows our project limits. It starts just south of the Higgins Avenue Bridge, just south of 3rd Street. We'll end up removing this center median. There's some improvements planned for the 3rd Street intersection, mainly to just improve pedestrian safety in crossing that street, and we'll show you that in a little bit here. But the main focus of the work is to rehab the existing bridge, and as part of that, we'll end up removing this existing concrete deck and build a new deck on there. It'll be quite a bit wider than the existing. So as part of that, we'll end up providing more space for bicycles and pedestrians. And there's a couple of options that we're looking at to do that. One would be a shared space that bikes and pedestrians would share, a shared use path. And then the other option we're considering would be a dedicated bike lane in the roadway, and then having just a walkway on either side of the bridge. And we'll show you some typical sections of those in a little bit. So the way we're going to widen the bridge over dry land, we'll widen these existing support piers to support an additional beam line, and that'll support the walkway. But over the river, we're trying to avoid doing any in-stream work, which kind of would complicate the project with permitting and obviously increase construction costs. So over the river, we have kind of a unique concept to cantilever, build a cantilever structure to support that wider walkway and avoid any in-stream work. So on the north side of the bridge here, this existing staircase that's on the east side will end up being removed with this project. Access will be maintained with the staircase that's by the parking structure in First Interstate Bank. And then because we're widening the bridge, this existing staircase down by the carousel, we have two options there. We'll either disassemble that and reinstall it just in a different location, or rebuild it with something similar. So we're still kind of vetting those options. The median will be removed across the bridge. We'll still maintain 4 lanes of traffic. And then our project ends just ahead or just south of Front Street, just enough to tie back into that existing infrastructure. Anything I missed on the overview?
No, I think you covered it, yeah.
Okay.
Maybe just a quick recap on why this is coming up now.
Well, there's a long history. I can give you hopefully the shorter version.
Short version, yeah.
But several years ago, Kent Barnes, who was our bridge engineer in Helena, knew that we had to do some upgrades on the deck, both on Madison Street and Higgins. The condition of the bridges were in I guess, such a state that we knew we needed to rehabilitate those structures. So we did a planning study to determine, what was the scope of the fix, or the scope for addressing the deterioration of the bridge structure. And through that process, we came to the conclusion that we were going to just do a rehabilitation. The reconstruction projects for both Madison and Higgins, you would be probably in the neighborhood of $20 million to replace each one of those bridges. So the cost of doing that was pretty significant. So we did choose to do a rehabilitation. The challenge with Higgins with the rehabilitation, though, was the fact that the structure that holds up the deck does not have the capacity to really provide a widened deck that's concrete. But at about the same time that study was finishing up, we were starting to roll into the design of the bridge over Reserve Street. And that bridge structure has a fiber reinforced polymer deck, which is very light compared to concrete. So we looked into the possible option of using that fiber reinforced polymer deck and just checking to see if that substructure underneath would be able to hold that concrete deck plus that fiber, plus the live loads that would be out there as well. And what we found was, and what Dustin and his crew found, was that it would have the capacity to hold that. So we were able to figure out a way to widen the bridge structure here, kind of through a creative process. So using some different materials than we normally would. So once we kind of figured that out, we nominated 2 projects, one on Madison and one on Higgins. Madison Street was scheduled for 2020. A few years ago, we had a hole in the deck on Madison Street, and pushed us into a situation where we had to replace the Madison Street deck relatively quick. At that time, Higgins was not funded in any year. We just knew that it was out there. We were able to use the funding that was going to be allocated for Madison Street to use that in Higgins in 2020, and then we used a different funding source to construct Madison. So roundabout way, we ended up here relatively quicker than I would have expected in 2014 when we were finishing up these planning studies. So I'm actually pretty happy. 6 years seems like a long time, but 6 years in our profession is pretty short. So I don't know. Is that kind of the story
very helpful.
you were looking
Thank you.
for?
Exactly.
Yeah, so these are the different options we're looking at. The existing bridge deck configuration is shown on the top there, so you have 4 lanes of traffic, and then obviously pretty limited space for pedestrians. And so the 2 options that we're investigating, and then we're hoping to get some feedback from at the public meeting tomorrow, is either a shared use path option, ends up being 13 feet on the west side and then 12 feet on the other side. And then the other option has a 10-foot walkway or 9-foot walkway, depending on what side you look at, and then a 5-foot dedicated bike lane.
Just looking at this and referring back to the previous shot where the cantilevered add-on, if you will, deck, that's going to be on the west side. So I'm assuming that with either of these options, that one of the walkways or walkway slash or a shared use lane is going to be on that cantilevered part, and the other walkway shared use lane is going to be on the deck. Is that correct?
That's correct, yeah. From the standpoint of the user, you probably won't notice a difference.
Okay, yeah. All right.
Why are you getting rid of the staircase on the northeast side?
Well, I think the staircase is owned by the city, and I think it was their election to get rid of it.
It was
so.
a request by the city to get rid of it because it's, 1, it's deteriorated, and 2, I don't think they're interested in maintaining it any longer. And then you've got an alternate option with the stairs on that northern side.
And then with, if you had the A option, the one where the bikes and the pedestrians are shared or share the same space, how do you envision that? So there's now there's a bike lane, like the south bike lane that goes in front of the theater. How would that feed into the shared section?
Right.
Yeah, we've got a display that I would show you.
So this is kind of a high-level look at how that would work. That green paint there indicates how the bike lanes would merge from the roadway onto the shared use path, heading southbound. And then obviously once you get close to 3rd Street, they would merge back onto the roadway.
So that'd be similar to what happens now when you head on Higgins going north of Broadway, right? You come make that little swoop up onto the bike lane.
But there isn't a bike lane to receive it on 3rd, or when you get on the other side of the river. That's where the bike lane disappears.
Yeah, so there'll be a bike lane. So, and we can look at that. You have both ends blown up, so this would be the north end,
Yep.
and there's the...
This is the south end here. Yeah, so we sort of run out of space as we get close to 4th. And we kind of have a shared space with traffics and bikes there.
And it is a bridge project funded through our bridge program. So we're going to be limited to the amount of work we can do on either end of the bridge.
I just want to say that I love the sort of the bulb out with the intersection with 3rd. I think that's a really good way to sort of clarify what people are supposed to be doing there. Right now it's kind of confusing. Between the 2 options that you seem to be are choosing between for the shared use pathway, my personal view is that keeping the bikes on the street would be preferable, mostly based on my personal experience on the Brooklyn Bridge, which has bikes and pedestrians all together on a dedicated path. And it's, I think bicyclists and pedestrians sort of acknowledge it's not a good situation at all. There's a lot of bicycle pedestrian conflict because people wear headphones these days. And, you know, if you're a bicyclist trying to overtake 2 pedestrians walking together, or someone walking in the middle of the path and they've got, you know, bags or something and they're wearing headphones, it can create dangerous situations. It happens all the time. And so just based on what you showed in the diagram, it looks to me that the bikes on the street would be preferable, but I'm sure there's other viewpoints here.
Britt?
I would have the different feedback of I would rather see the barrier maximize the protection of the people that aren't in cars. So anybody that wants to ride their bike fast could just jump into the travel lane as they have the right to do, and then if a car wanted to pass that cyclist, they could pass them in that second car travel lane. So my personal preference as a parent and just kind of someone who doesn't necessarily like riding in traffic, that I would like the option to ride my bike on the sidewalk, though I'm guessing it would be too crowded and I probably wouldn't a lot of the time. But it would be nice. I think it would be nice for people that don't feel safe on the road to have the choice. And the other thing that I like about that option is it puts those two barriers at a point that's far enough apart that if down the road you ever considered allowing us to turn that into a fewer lanes of car traffic, that we could then add bike lanes on the inside later. If a car travel lane were removed at that time, that would make room for the bike lanes and the big wide pedestrian path. So I like that. And I also think that this is a comment for the city if it's a city issue about the staircase, but I think the staircase should stay there just as an emergency exit off the bridge, or it just seems like it's good to have ways down when you've got the shore right below you. So that's my feedback.
Gene?
Yeah, kind of echoing what Britt said. If you can put that previous cross-section up again. Yeah, so looking at the bottom one, when you have the bike lanes on the roadway, essentially, of course, you've got your painted line and your stencil, but that concrete barrier, I would think visually, emotionally, whatever, would tend to make that bike lane feel more narrow, where you've got something erected, solid erected next to you. And plus, obviously, you're going to get all of the plowed snow and whatever over there anyhow. I think keeping it as a shared use walkway, first of all, would hopefully keep the plowed snow off of the lane. Perhaps painting and stenciling lines for the bicycle portion and pedestrian portion is not going to be a cure-all, but it could help some. Most of the bike lanes that are out there now, the shared use path, the Milwaukee Road Trail, Bitterroot Trail, also have significant pedestrian bicycle mix. I haven't found it personally to be a terrible issue, so I would go along with the idea of keeping it basically a shared use path across the bridge.
Jeff?
Yeah, I have seen those videos of the Brooklyn Bridge where if you're on a bike, like you're just constantly weaving in and around people. But I do like the shared, despite that, I do like the shared path. And one reason is there's so many like family events downtown where I personally would bike downtown with my son who's 6, but don't feel comfortable having him in the sort of narrow bike lane going over the bridge. But his bike, even a kid's bike, doesn't fit or isn't appropriate on the pedestrian section. So I think having the wider shared use path gives you the freedom to have maybe more families bike across the bridge.
Great. Robin?
So are there plans for striping that shared use path to designate that the inside is bikes only? Because I would say that would be a really key point for me. In Minneapolis, we have quite a few of these arrangements where you have a barricade separating traffic from non-motorized traffic and pedestrians. And in all cases, or in almost all cases where you have these so-called cycle tracks, you have striping to separate pedestrians from bicyclists to avoid any sort of conflict.
I think we would consider that. We just haven't gotten that far enough along. I mean, the first step is to figure out which typical section we want to move forward with, and then how we detail that would follow.
We had talked about doing this on Russell Street, though, so So when Russell Street Bridge is constructed, it's going to have the shared use path component. It'll have a raised bike lane that enters into the shared use path, but we had talked about delineating those spaces. What I recall was that Federal Highway Administration is not going to allow that. And I don't know, Ben, if you were part of that discussion, but I don't think there's any markings in the MUTCD. From my recollection about that conversation was we had talked about doing that on Russell Street, and we couldn't because of that. And had it been okay on Russell Street, we would have done it here. So it's not a new concept or a new idea to stripe that. It would make sense to do that. Given the rules, though, we're abiding by, right now isn't an option. We can look further into that.
The MUTCD does.
Thanks. One of the things I thought I remembered from the bike summit a couple weeks ago was that those are, in terms of being guidelines, that they do offer flexibility, and it'd be hard to understand why there would be objections to simply laying down a paint line. I mean, there's nothing structural about it, like a curb or anything. So.
As long as we're on expressing some opinions on this, I would throw mine in as well with respect to the share. It definitely encourages more of the concerned but somewhat willing, especially parents with family. Again, that's been mentioned. There is the option then for those high-speed cyclists, and depending on their confidence, they can take the lane and still be commuter-sized access and be able to go at their speed that they would like to be a little quicker than trying to negotiate through pedestrians. This could be especially a problem when there are some significant events down in Karis Park, that there may be a fair amount of pedestrians standing at the overlook and being able to watch what's happening, or even the Brennan's Wave activity. It's a good vantage point for pedestrians to be able to stand and watch, but you get quite a crowd there, and it could get difficult for cyclists to get through. So it's one of those things that needs to be negotiated by those participants at the time. Britt?
I think this is really great that you guys are expanding the space for people to walk across the bridge, because we all know that it needs it. I had one more thought about, I like the bicycle merge idea, if you could go back to that. However, I'm trying to jive in my mind the shared use path concept with that one-way nature of the bicycle lane, and so I wanted to know how you plan to deal with people that are biking the wrong direction on the shared use path and then encounter that open bike lane going the opposite direction.
Well, when we, as city staff, kind of proposed this idea of the shared use, we expect it to be directional for bicyclists. And so we're still exploring options for ways to delineate that and make that apparent. Some communities have used signage or pavement markings that are not in the MUTCD. Now, I've heard that the next edition of MUTCD will likely have something for this, which might be out before this gets built. I also think that there's a potential to request to experiment and use different pavement markings, but our goal, knowing that there will be exceptions like there are today, is that the bike portion would be one direction. And that's the same goal with Russell.
Bob, do you mind if I just kind of give you some other food for thought?
Absolutely.
And I kind of fall in line with more of what Danny's thinking about in that mix of different users. And I understand there's going to be some cyclists that they may want to ride fast, and we can say, if you want to ride fast, go right in the driving lane, and that's an acceptable option. I will tell you there's some risk there of conflict between cyclists and driver, because those drivers are going to say, your spot is over on the other side of the rail, you should be over there, and I'm going to let you know that one way or the other. which is unfortunate. Another challenge is if you do have cyclists that say, well, I'm going to use the bike lane and then enter onto the shared use path so that I stay in my space. You know, a 200-pound man riding his bicycle, 20 miles an hour, that can be fairly devastating to a 5-year-old child that doesn't understand what that white line means, right? So there is risk there. I would say additionally, when you, and I'll look at this end first, the south end, when you, as a cyclist, when you come off of this shared use path and you're down into this bike lane again, drivers driving down the road here may not recognize that you as a cyclist are going to enter into this bike lane, and if they are going to turn right onto 3rd Street, there is a high risk that you will get hooked right there. So cyclists and drivers are going to have a very short period and a short distance to figure that out and work together. So I think there's some risk. If you have somebody in a bike lane, however, it's very clear to the driver and the cyclist where each of those individuals are supposed to be. That's the south end. I'll tell you on the north end, it's kind of similar. You'll have a cyclist that drops off into the bike lane here. Well, that's right where the right turn lane starts. So you're going to have a right turn merge from this through lane. So again, somebody from out of town not familiar with this is going to maybe think, well, that cyclist is just going to stay right on the sidewalk and keep going, when in fact they're going to get into this bike lane. And so I would say, even though it's more comfortable for that 60%, it's more inviting, people feel more comfortable. At the same point in time, you're putting them in a situation where they feel comfortable in a less, what I would call, safe situation. And I don't particularly like to use the word safe, but it's a context you all can understand. So those are some things to think about as you say, I want to recommend one over the other. Is look at that long-term safety too, and operations. And those are the things I'm going to think about. I understand you want to get folks comfortable riding their bike in downtown, but at the same point in time, I want to make sure that when they're downtown riding their bike, that they are in a safe situation.
I think just to add to that, I think those are really good points. Another concern that I have is I think the data shows that if you were to remove a bike lane from a road, it increases the average miles per hour that you see from drivers just based on this perception that this road is for cars only. I don't have to worry about bikers. And I think that could be worrisome with the Higgins Street Bridge if you have drivers who are just about to enter the most not congested, but the most used part of town and by pedestrians and bicyclists. If they're thinking like, oh, I don't have to worry about bicyclists, they're going to be off, hanging out with the pedestrians on this shared use path. I can go, 35 instead of 25. I'm in a rush. I need to get to I-90 or something like that. Yeah, I definitely do understand the appeal of having bicyclists, pedestrians together on a nice, 12-foot wide shared path, 13. But I guess I just have these very visceral memories of bicycle pedestrian conflict. Well-meaning people on both sides. Just there's a wide variety of bicyclists out there. There's a wide variety of pedestrians out there, and all it takes is one person, not doing what you expect them to do, and then you can get a bad situation.
It's a little different because it's a bridge situation, but the width of our shared use paths now is 10 feet. The paved riverfront trail, that's only 10. So this would be, 1 1/3 times as wide as our other paved trails, which see a lot of use.
Gene, appreciate your mention of the fact that coming off the bridge and then onto a path again can sort of lead to an unexpected situation for some people driving. Right hooks happen now all the time anyhow, and most bicyclists know to kind of keep an extra eyeball to the back of people who are coming beyond them at a place where they're going to be going straight where somebody else can make a right turn. That's something obviously we can probably maybe do a little bit better job of education in town for, but in terms of approaching heading north and towards Front Street, as you come down the bridge now on the bike lane, you have to make a negotiation with motor vehicles who are going into the right turn only lane. I don't know if it's an only lane or not. Anyhow, into that right turn lane when you want to go straight. So again, it's the type of thing where people who use the bridge a lot, whether they're driving or biking, have a pretty decent, my experience at least has been, have a pretty good negotiating opportunities and skills. I can see where it might be a little bit more problematic with the shared use path coming off the bridge into a bike lane. So it's certainly something to keep in mind as we move along. Again, I'll just go back to the idea of people wanting to come over with families and kids on bikes. It's going to make it that much more untenable for them in terms of safety. When kids maybe are going to be wobbling around a little bit, they'd rather have them do it in a protected space to come up the bridge to go downtown. Otherwise, they have to go down to the Van Buren Bridge if they wanted to get that kind of protection, if you will. So anyhow, I can see the pluses and minuses on both sides. I'd still kind of lean towards the shared use path and kind of maybe with some signage or something as a warning to both cyclists and cars. I know we hate to oversign things, but or using some temporary delineators or something to help educate people during the first few months when it's there to use that extra caution and consideration. Just the fact that you construct something new usually puts people on a more cautious note anyhow.
We currently have on Higgins in the cycle track section signs at all of the alleys, and I think also at the Broadway intersection that caution drivers to watch for cyclists before they make their right turn. Those similar signs, I would hope, could be put into place at these shared use paths where they drop off back into the bike lane, that would warn the drivers that the bike lane is going to resume, type of thing. I realize there are good arguments on both sides, and I'm kind of on the fence, but I'm still definitely pretty much towards the shared use as encouraging more active cycling. Ben?
I kind of want to put it back on you guys a little. Is there a potential for a third option that creates a separated bike facility and a separated pedestrian facility?
Oh, you mean?
So there would be a curb protected bike lane.
You know, I don't know if you're essentially doing you're doing the same thing as the shared use path. Then you would take up the space with some sort of barrier between those two. It would essentially be a handrail, is what I would envision. I would say the benefit with the bike lane piece is that you actually have more space available for non-motorized because you have the 2-foot shy distance between the white stripe and the physical barrier for the vehicles, right? So if you are going to do that, you're going to have 5 feet between those two barriers for a cyclist. And some of that, you're going to have a very small barrier width. You're probably 2 inches, 3 inches for a barrier width all the way down on either side. You could try that. I don't know, Dustin, how much dead load that creates. If it becomes an issue with the fiber deck.
Could look at it. Yeah, I mean, you probably couldn't add like a concrete barrier that's, 1.5 feet wide. It would probably take up too much space, and then you have the weight issue. So it'd probably have to be, a handrail or something, 2 to 6 inches or something like that.
Let's see, so we're 13, so it'd be 8 on one side and 7 on the other as far as pedestrian. And then if we did, the bike lanes were, 9 and 10. So
right.
You're cutting by 2 feet essentially of that usable space.
Oh, yeah.
So, I don't know if that makes sense.
Britt?
I think there's more room to chop off pedestrian space on the east side of the bridge. It definitely gets less use than the west side, and I'm sure you probably have some data about that. I had an idea for something that might help with the situation of those bicycle pedestrian conflicts on the shared use path is that concrete barrier maybe shouldn't be totally contiguous. Perhaps people make a mistake. Maybe they catch themselves biking the wrong direction, or they decide that they can't take all the conflict and they want to be out in the travel lane, but if there's a barrier that's contiguous the whole length of the bridge, they can't make a jump back and forth. So if there was a couple little breaks every 100 feet or 50 feet where they could if they made a mistake, they could switch, that I think would help that a lot. Because a lot of people would just self-correct if they catch themselves going the wrong way. But if they're halfway up the bridge, then they're going to have to throw their bike over that barrier.
One thing too, these I just want to clarify
Yeah.
something that we haven't talked about, and I don't know if you were going to show images of the barriers or not, but we actually have two barrier options. One is the solid concrete barrier, which all these displays have. We also have another option that is, I guess you can see the image. It's a three-rail steel barrier. If you are familiar with Madison Street, which was recently built, that is actually a two-rail steel. This would be three. And we actually have new crash-tested requirements for barrier rail. Madison Street actually doesn't meet the standard now. It's only a year old because the standards were recently changed. So that we would have to go with this little bit higher rail, which is fine, but it doesn't address what you're talking about, like leaving a gap. And I don't know that we can. We'd have to look into that. Typically when we do rail, what we don't want to do is have somebody snag it. If they hit that rail in a vehicle, they get snagged, and it causes even worse crash. So I don't know that we can do that, but I like the creative idea.
And the other comment I wanted to make is, I know it's outside of the scope of this project to affect all of Higgins from Broadway to, say, 4th or 5th or something, but a 3 or a 2-lane Higgins would actually provide enough space for bike lanes and all of the pedestrian space. So I think that's something to consider that I just want to mention.
Yeah, it's not going to happen with this project, and I think that's another concept for another project.
Okay.
I'd like to say, I've appreciated this discussion because I certainly don't. I think there are benefits and drawbacks to both scenarios. I think seeing cyclists as vehicles is sort of important, or that's one thing that's comes to mind here is, are they, is it a recreational activity where we sort of don't see them as being an important mode of transport, or are they, do they belong in the roadway? Because I see I would envision very few cyclists would brave 4 lanes of traffic with no opportunity no sort of window for room for error, and if we do have a shared use option that's where the space for cyclists is poorly delineated, I think that may not be a good option here. So I think I'd just be curious to know more about striping options and whether that is in fact off limits, or whether there might be some wiggle room there.
Jane?
Just one thing that just kind of came to my mind, which means it's probably not worth a lot, but in terms of helping divide the pedestrian and bicycling traffic, if you go with the shared use lane, rather than necessarily relying on paint and stencils and signs, one thing, which I think, I have to check it out for safety, but to have I'll call it inverse rumble strip without the rumbles is you would basically take the flat profile with the pedestrians here and the bikes here, and then put in about an 8-inch wide, sort of like little raised table like this, that as people are walking, their feet would hit this and say, oh, that's right, this is a different lane. And if a bicyclist came across it, it wouldn't be disruptive. It would be gentle enough that it wouldn't cause any spills or anything. And it could probably be put in without adding any weight load significant, and help delineate the pedestrian bicycling portions.
What would be most helpful for you guys? I mean, obviously this is good discussion, but if the board were to make a formal recommendation next month, is that in your window? You know, if early May, is that?
I think we're going to have a decision hopefully before then.
Oh, okay.
We need to get HDR information so they can get going on design. But I would, I don't know. Bob, you obviously have some time to think about this, and we have a meeting on Friday, so
right.
we can make a recommendation from the board today, or give us feedback on Friday too.
It's sounding like we've got a fairly high preponderance of interest in the shared use side of things, as opposed to the separated bike lane in the street. So that's probably what I would bring at this point, unless I hear further discussion and objection to that to our stakeholders meeting on Friday, as well as I'll be encouraging board members to attend the open house tomorrow and provide any comments, additional comments they might have at that open house. I plan to show up there for a little while anyway, and see what kind of comments are floating around. So it's definitely a hard decision to make, and I don't envy you making that final decision on that. So
I would say maybe a challenging decision.
Right.
I mean, you've got opinions, and I'm going to look at it as an engineer and partially as a cyclist too, but more as an engineer and wanting to make sure that we provide a safe facility. But at the end of this process, when we have a structure out there, it's going to be significantly better. No matter what direction we go, it's going to be a lot better than it is today. Right? So it's a win regardless. It's just trying to make it the best it can be. So.
Right. Further comments from the board at this point? Britt?
I'm wondering if there could maybe be a third option that would put a Sharrow in that right travel lane, so that we firmly acknowledge it's okay to be either place. When you come to that merge point for the bicycle lane to go into the shared use path, that would actually be a Y that would show visually that you as a cyclist could go toward that Sharrow. And then I probably wouldn't, but anybody that was up for that could then feel secure, and the cars would see that and feel like, okay, these people are allowed to be here.
Thank you, Brett, for that comment. Okay. Robin? Yes.
Yeah, I need to head to my class, my graduate class, but I guess in the absence of a viable striping and or barrier option, I would also say that I've also been in other cycle tracks where not only is there a there's striping, but there are also often plastic barriers separating bicyclists from pedestrians. I think in the absence of that sort of infrastructure, that the on-street bike lane would be my vote, and I'm just going to add that one to the tally, and unfortunately I need to run to class, but I appreciate the discussions we've had, and I appreciate your bringing to, as you mentioned, more appealing options than the existing infrastructure.
Great. Okay. Thank you both for being here. Appreciate the input, the chance to see these firsthand at this point, and We may have some more discussion depending on amount of time at the end of this meeting, and I'll get inundated with the right comments to bring back to the meeting on Friday, so we'll see where we go.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, Dustin. Thank you, Shane.
Thanks.
Just pull this thing out of here.
Thanks, guys.
Yeah, thank you.
See you Friday. Yep, we'll see you. What's tomorrow? Oh, maybe. I have a lot of other things I think. Not yours.
So next on the agenda is discussion about the Johnson Street from north to south. And Ben, I guess you're going to lead us in that discussion. Some additional information that has come forward at this point.
Yeah, this discussion will be really quick, I think. So, because they are moving along with kind of decision-making about what this area looks like for the park design and all of that. So we're talking about this section here. So, where they landed is that these bus stops here and here are going to be consolidated at Central, which is also our Greenway crossing. There's going to be a bulb out at Central that will not preclude bike lanes in the future on Johnson, but that there's no current plan. This project does not include restriping Johnson, so the question of whether or not we remove parking and add bike lanes to Johnson is kind of moot at this point.
How can you do the bulb out without restriping? Are they just going to restripe where the bulb out goes?
Because currently there's only just a double yellow in the center, so the bulb out will just restrict parking in that area, but there's still plenty of travel room in the lane.
Kemp has bike lanes all the way up and down, right?
No.
It does not. Will it be green?
What?
Will it be green bike lanes?
Kemp?
The street just west of Johnson?
Nope. 2 streets over, Schilling is considered a neighborhood greenway, but it does not have bike lanes, and nor are there plans for them.
Okay. I knew there was one street, I just got the wrong one. That was supposed to be more of a bicycle magnet, if you will.
So the bus stop will be between the bulb outs, or will be?
It'll be just north of the intersection. It'll be, the bulb out will be one long extension, curb extension through the intersection, and it will include the bus stop on the north end, so that the bus is pulled over partly out of traffic, but also a little away from the curb, and that bus stop will be brought up to full ADA. And I think that's especially true now that, I don't know if you saw the news today, but Mountain Line received a sizable grant to improve a lot of their bus stops.
So it's going to be so you got the curb here, it's going to be like a bulb out, and then an area for the bus to pull in, and then another bulb out? Is that?
Yeah, I wonder what the, let me just try and draw.
Show your skills.
So here's the curb line. The bulb out is going to come like this. And then here's the, let me draw the other street now. So, yeah, this whole, the bus will then stop like right here.
Oh,
Does that make sense?
so cars just really can't get past unless there's nobody coming the opposite way?
There is, it's a 40-foot wide street, so there's room for the bus to pull over. The bulb out's only going to be, I think, about 4 feet off the curb.
Okay, that's just basically room for the help of passengers, kind of?
What it does is it helps, so there's a ADA requirement that a bus stop have an 8-foot deep landing so that a wheelchair can get off. And so this helps provide that space while maintaining the boulevard as much as possible for grassy area and not having to move the location of the current sidewalk.
And has added benefit of reducing the crossing distance once the bus pulls away.
Yeah, and on this side at all times. And the bus will not be blocking the crosswalk. It's far enough north. This is not to scale, but it's far enough north that the bus will never be blocking the crosswalk. It'll, could be a visibility issue, but again, you're behind the bus. It's not like where the bus stops now at Home Resource, where the bus is in front of the crosswalk. That's where it creates a real hazard.
Is there a ramp off of that bulb out for crossing Johnson? Can you point where on it?
There'll be one on this. Again, this is not quite in a good location. So there'll be one here and one here.
Great. Any other comments for Ben on that? Questions?
And this has been vetted. Vince helped do a drawing. Vince with Mountain Line helped draw the stop area, and MRA has done a good job of running it through me, engineering Mountain Line and parks and meeting everyone's goals.
Great. Okay. Looks like we're ready to move on to 6.3.
All right.
Mike.
No real news on Dockless Bike Share. Other than that, since the articles were in the paper, several of the other companies have gotten in touch with Jordan and I asking for an audience. And Jordan likes playing fair, so he wants to invite them. So in a couple weeks, a representative from Spin Bike will be here. They are the American-owned closest competitor to Lime Bike, I would say. Their bikes are orange, I believe. And so yeah, rep will come, and I'll shoot an email when I have a date and time confirmed to the board, inviting them to that. The other thing is that we've heard loud and clear from the city administration that when we express concerns about some of the issues that other communities are having with multiple bike share programs, we've heard that the city of Missoula is not in the business of limiting competition or restricting business activities. And so we're still figuring out what that is, but we're going to be careful to in no way restrict, basically sign a single-use agreement or something like that. That is not the direction that we want to go as a city. Now, again, the reason that we are even considering all of this is that Jordan started reaching out on behalf of the university. So what the university does is a different story, but I feel a sneeze coming up. Might have made it through. So my guess is that the earliest we will see something would be midsummer, but again, there's no guarantees. It's something that we're eager to test out and see if it works, but also trying to get ahead of the game as much as we can with what our expectations for a company might be and how it would be managed.
Jane?
Ben, do they ever do, whether it's Lime or the other one, do they ever come in and say, we'll do so you can make up your mind, we'll come in and do a pilot program for 2 months and then you can say yes or no, or do they need a total commitment for it? Or
They really don't need anything because there's no charge to the city. So they're just doing it. They want to partner with the city and with the community that they land in because they want the relationship to be smooth. But no, just like Uber, they could just show up tomorrow if they wanted and dump a bunch of bikes on the ground, and we can't tell them no.
One issue that I've noted, and I'm not sure if I relayed this on to you previously or not, the one device that they were displaying at the last workshop, the Lime bikes, was the electric scooter, which I have questions with respect to how legal those will be on streets, sidewalks, or anywhere else within the city. They could be permitted on the campus, I presume, because the campus could set their own standards there, but as far as the streets and sidewalks of Missoula, those would fall under city and state law. Do you see any issues with that particular device?
You know, I don't, but it is something worth keeping an eye on. My brother-in-law was just visiting from San Diego, where Lime Bike has put those out on the street, and he says that they're everywhere and people love them. He has a friend who now still drives, but parks as far away from his destination as possible and gets on one of those scooters, and because he's 6 or 8 miles away from his destination, but now instead of circling the block and getting close to the front door, he parks a few blocks away and gets one of those scooters and then rides it in the rest of the way. So they're so far not causing really many problems there, but different size, different climate, the whole bunch. But I'm not aware of anything immediately contradictory in municipal or state code.
Okay, anything else for Ben on the Lime bikes and dockless bike share? Okay. And we are now to your recap of the Bike Walk Summit. Ben? Yeah,
so last week? 2 weeks ago?
2 weeks ago.
When were we there? 2 weeks ago. We meaning Missoula in Motion, most of the transportation planning office, myself, Gene was there, attended the Bike Walk Summit over in Bozeman, hosted by Bike Walk Montana. And it was pretty enlightening this year. There were some good presentations and some good guest speakers, including a guy from Montreal who works for Velo Quebec, which is a huge advocacy organization there that has some overlap with what Adventure Cycling does, but for Canada. He gave a presentation about winter maintenance, and I was hoping to find an example in video, but basically the big takeaway was that sweepers work a lot better for snow removal than plows when it comes to bike facilities. So I wonder what this video will show. But that in winter cycling cities, one of the things that they do is they sweep their cycle tracks and sweep their shared use paths. And they're able to keep them much cleaner than we currently are keeping ours, with no need for the gravel and dirt that we put on our facilities. Now, in-lane bike lanes or in-road bike lanes are still an issue. As you can see in this picture, it's an issue in Copenhagen even, but that's why they're moving towards cycle tracks wherever possible, and are prioritizing bike maintenance or winter maintenance for bicycle riders in cities that are getting a high mode share. And oh, there it is. There's a walk behind sweeper. Did everyone? That was a quick shot. Oh. There. And so there were walk behind ones. They also had pictures of ones that were attached to like bobcats or other devices, and were really effective at clearing snow. Now, there were some caveats there. One is really heavy snows. You still need to plow it before you sweep. And 2 is that wet snow can be a problem. But in town, most of our snows are not that heavy, and our snow is generally pretty light and dry.
Any issue with the freezing thawing cycles where you just get black ice on the things?
No, that was when you sweep it, it's actually more clear. And the other thing that they do is they brine it after they sweep.
Oh, okay.
So then snow doesn't really stick to it, and it stays kind of thawed, whereas the surrounding areas might freeze a little bit. Another bit of interesting news from the summit was that the state is undertaking a statewide bicycle pedestrian plan. I've actually been invited to be on the steering committee for that as the only, well, there's me from a city, and then there's a city manager from Lewistown, and we're the only non-agency people invited to be part of the steering committee currently. And so this is a high level. It's not add a trail to Mullen Road. It's kind of policy and best practices and that sort of thing. And in the not too distant future, there will be a survey put out where they're going to be collecting feedback, and I will share that with you guys and encourage you guys to share that far and wide with your circles to give the state feedback on how biking and walking can be improved everywhere. One of the other visiting people was a planner and engineer out of Boise. Vitruvian Planning was the company. Chris Danley was the name of the guy. And he gave a really great presentation with a focus on safety, and that, you know, kind of some of the takeaways from that were that urban contexts are different than suburban or rural, and that they should be designed accordingly, and we should not tolerate highway standards on our city streets. And then the other piece with that was Vision Zero, which the state of Montana has adopted, and the kind of back-of-the-box description of Vision Zero is that humans make mistakes. Those mistakes should not be fatal, and that it flips it, rather than on the users, rather than be the user's responsibility, that makes it the designer's responsibility. And so that's something that we pay a lot of lip service to, but we're really not currently doing. Gene, did you have any other takeaways from the summit?
Yeah, thanks, Ben. One of the interesting things I found I didn't quite expect is that there was a lot of, I think, good input from the Department of Transportation in terms of what their planning process was and what funding was available and maintenance funding was available. And the only thing I would have asked of them maybe in the future, or even other presenters, is sort of have a type of synopsis written up, especially like from the state, to sort of give a little Bible of, well, if you want to approach a legislator, or if you want to have your best shot at getting funding, here's the best way to go about it, here's the process, here's the type of things you should address, here's the type of things you might want to avoid saying to avoid ruffling feathers, etc. So I thought that was really good. I didn't expect that much in terms of the state and advocacy groups connecting as well as they seem to be able to do.
There was definitely a greater MDT presence at this one than at previous summits, that's for sure.
And the one thing about Vision Zero, which again was interesting, the gentleman from Quebec, Chris, I love this talk. It's just clever as well as informative, was the idea that, again, a lot of these areas where you're going to have normal interactions between motor vehicles and pedestrians and or cyclists is to keep those potential messed up interactions from becoming fatal. You really have to keep speeds down. That's going to be a very hard sell, because in most cases they looked at saying 80-mile-an-hour speeds don't make sense, even on interstates, that they were, I think, topping out at like 65, and then some of the places where we would typically have 40 or 45 miles an hour, they were saying probably 30. So that's, I mean, it makes sense from a physics standpoint in terms of livability, but in terms of being a political sell, I know it's going to be tough.
In other news, the message went out last week for the job posting for the bike ambassadors. And I got together with Missoula in Motion this year, and we've tweaked the job description just a little bit. There's going to be a component now of going door to door. and trying to provide information to people about biking. Basically asking them, hey, do you want to bike more? What would help you? And offering kind of a menu of items to them, and including what we are politely calling hand-holding, you know, like showing up at 7 a.m. and riding with them to work and showing them the best route and, you know, whatever it takes. So this approach is called individualized marketing, and it's a direction that the profession has been going for a few years, and so this is our kind of toe dip into it, is by adding it to the ambassador's plate. And essentially what we're going to do is pick a couple residential streets that are along the Mountain Line's bolt routes. So it might be, I don't know this for sure yet, but it might be Phillips in the west side and Johnson and Franklin of the Fort, and go door to door and within a block of each side of the ride that the bus is on. And with the idea being that if bike doesn't work or your bike breaks down, that you have a reliable transit service that can kind of get your back if you do that. So yeah, we've added a little bit to the job description to describe this slight adjustment. The time will probably come out of the time that they currently spend standing on the street trying to address poor behaviors. I have an intern finishing up a mapping project right now, creating a hike and bike map for the region. So it's bigger than city limits, smaller than the county, and it will be, unlike our current online bike maps, it will have a "You Are Here" icon on it. So if you're actually using, and it'll be mobile friendly. So if you're out on a trail, you'll be able to find yourself. It will also have geolocated PDFs. So if you don't want to be using your kind of roaming service out in the wilderness, up on Jumbo or something, you could download the PDF for that, and it will still geolocate you when you're out there, but you won't be using your data when you're doing it, or at least not as much. And there are, it's tied to the Missoula in Motion kind of Way to Go Club or Way to Go Missoula webpage, so it has route finding options and some of our health goals as well, and so it's a pretty neat map. I'm going to look for an email soon. I'm going to send it to the group and ask you guys for individualized comments. Jen is looking for feedback on the map itself and how it's not just its functionality, but what it looks like and that sort of stuff. So I'd welcome any comments that you guys might have. Another email that you should look for soon is that the bike ped counts are coming. In fact, the next one is the first Tuesday of May, which I believe we scheduled our meeting to not coincide with. I think that we scheduled ours as the second Tuesday because it's May 1st is the Tuesday. I think that we made it May 8th. Yeah, look for that. That will be 2 hours at this time. So hopefully you'll be able to volunteer and help out with that. This will be, I believe, the 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18. So this is the 19th year that we will have done this. And so it's on the cycle where it's the full kind of survey as well as, so there's a survey as well as just counting. So we're looking for extra volunteers this year. And then finally, this is going to come through council committee next week, but I am pursuing rewriting the bike parking chapter in the zoning code. The several reasons why. One is that it's currently tied to our car parking, which means that you calculate your car parking and then it's a percentage. And that just doesn't quite make sense with our long-range goals. It also really doesn't make sense with some of the different uses. There are kind of big box uses that might need a lot of car parking that don't need the corresponding amount of bike parking. Similarly, there are other uses that might not generate a lot of car traffic that do generate a lot of bike traffic. And so, we're looking at separating the bike parking from the car parking, being a little more intentional in how we're putting the required number of bike spaces per land use. And potentially, we're going to look into doing a geographic component as well. So would kind of the downtown and central core need more bike racks than, say, North Reserve or South Brooks? That's something that we're going to explore, and how other communities do it. One of the challenges, this is something I've been wanting to do for 3 years now, one of the challenges is that my preliminary look at how we require bike parking versus the rest of the country is that we already are one of the best cities at it. And so even though it creates some headaches for us and doesn't work in every location and leads to some confusion among developers and staff, we're still requiring more bike parking spaces and doing it a little more methodically than a lot of places are. So that's something that once I actually, all I'm bringing to council next week is the introduction and saying, hey, this is something I want to do, and getting their kind of blessing for it. It will probably likely be 2 to 3 months before I'm actually coming back with some recommendations, let alone some actual code language. But it's something that I will definitely bring back to this board when we're getting closer to making recommendations about that. And that was about all I had on my updates list.
Great. Any follow-up questions?
Yeah, Ben, you mentioned the ambassadors doing door-to-door. So it's like a kind of interactive survey type of thing, is it? You said something about, well, would you like to do more biking, or do you bike now, or whatever, is it?
Yeah, so it'd be a very brief survey, and basically if they answer, they say thanks but no thanks, just fine, then we move on. But if they say, you know, I would like 2 more, this is why I don't feel comfortable, or this is what I'd want, then they'll schedule a time and come back with a map, lights, registration, a pump, a patch kit, and an idea of the destination, and some ways to ride with them. So or showing someone, maybe someone's like, I would ride to the grocery store, but I have no idea how to carry packages. Maybe they'll come back in a week with a borrowed cargo bike, or show off different types of panniers or something like that. So really it's bringing people, there's kind of theories of stages of change. And so the idea is that bringing people along on that, on their behavior change steps is very, very valuable. So you don't have to go from driving every day to being a dedicated bike commuter. Even if you go from driving every day to thinking about biking to the ice cream shop once a week, that's a noticeable change and something that we can, that in the long run helps us achieve our goals.
Yeah, I would say that type of personal one-on-one advocacy and support is a great way to go. I don't know if it might be possible either this year or maybe in the future, but if in terms of a survey, maybe as they're going around to put out little, like they do during election times, like little doorknob hangers, and say, if you're having any difficulties in bicycling, please go to the website, or call this number or whatever, and we'll get back in touch with you. That way, for the amount of time they spend, they might be able to reach a broader spectrum of people. So maybe there might be something like that included down the road.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
Okay, anything else for Ben at this point? Okay.
I have a question, but it's unrelated to this. Should I mention it later?
It relates to Ben's office?
Yes.
Yeah. Go ahead now.
I'm noticing, of course, there's a lot of construction right now, but I keep getting confused in certain parts of downtown. There's a new brewery, like on Patty Street, going up, and I got caught this morning where I had Main Street, or was that Front Street? Front Street was coming at me, and I had to go the wrong way for a little bit because I got caught in a wrong place with a bunch of brand new fencing that had gone up near the library, the new library. And it's like there's so many fences and closed travel lanes for cars. I'm wondering, what is the process for construction sites to be allowed to close traffic, and how can we force them to consider bicycle and pedestrian traffic better when they do that?
It's a good question. They're supposed to consider bike and ped traffic, but there's no, when we grant them their permit, there's no timeline associated with it. So the city doesn't know when they're actually going to close the street and do that construction. They need to get all the permits ahead of time, and there should be signage that says sidewalk closed, or if there is a bike lane, they need to sign that ahead of time saying that the bike facility is closed. That's one of the issues, though, is that the letter of the law does not actually get us to the intent. An example here is that Russell Street is not going to, seemingly is not going to have a north-south pedestrian detour because there isn't currently a sidewalk on Russell, and so because there isn't a pedestrian space today, they don't have to put in a detour one, even though we all know that people walk up and down that shoulder. So that's one where the letter of the law is really not helping us.
And I'm also noticing these kind of synergistic effects where it might be there's individual permits, but in the case that happened to me this morning, it was the library and something happening on the other side of the street as well. And so it was the fact that those two were both closing different parts of the street that made it so that there was no street left. And so, and by the new hotel and the brewery, sometimes the same thing happens on certain days. And so it almost, that's bigger than any individual project, and I guess I just want to throw it out there to understand how we could make that better, though by the time we think of something, they'll have finished one of the projects and the fence will come down and then we'll forget till it happens again.
Yeah. It has been an issue this year for people of all modes, and there isn't a good answer.
Do they ever put in, when they do these constructions, and again, they're from different companies, but can the city ever come in and put up temporary, 15-mile-an-hour speed limit kind of things for those streets where they're kind of all jumbled up like that?
Maybe.
I think to be particular about it, the hot spot is definitely Main and Patty right now, and also pretty much Front all the way, because you've got that just so much stuff being built on Front Street that it's just kind of getting chaotic, and maybe it's to look at it holistically would be a good city perspective.
I don't know that it's a total answer to this, but I've found it very valuable to be on the city weekly news update newsletter, which also includes a road report, and that also includes trail reports, and it is usually fairly accurate and gives you an idea of what's coming up.
I don't think there are any easy answers, and I think that everyone wants to do as much as we can. At the same time, I don't think it would hurt if you wrote the Public Works Committee a recommendation that they improve, whatever it is, that they improve warning and closure for, closure, detour, and warning signs for non-motorized users. I think that there are committee members that would be very sympathetic to that and would welcome receiving that recommendation.
I made a note of that to get that to Ryan for future agendas. Okay, anything else for Ben's office as his office? Otherwise, we'll move on to Gene.
Yeah, just real quick, Ben, you mentioned about how well we're doing with bike parking. I definitely agree. I just noticed in bringing my bike out here with the slightly angled ones, is I think they might get a lot more use, or people would feel more comfortable with using the street side one if they were moved back another foot off the curb, because a bumper of a truck can definitely come in and gnash your bike a little bit. So in the future, maybe to move those back another foot, foot and a half off the curb.
Yeah, I'm probably a season or 3 away from looking at this block, but it's definitely on my list. There's another couple blocks that I want to tackle their layout first, but this is on there.
Okay. Ready for project list?
I think so. So I don't have much update. I tried to schedule a meeting with Brian Hensel and some of his staff to see if we could get a better handle on which of these projects they're actually going to get to, because some of them have been on his list for 5 years now, and they just run out of time, resources, what have you. But the England Boulevard one, it is in some ways the most confusing. It's also one that I think will just require some striping work that everyone wants to do, so the kind of least hassle politically to do that one. Another, trying to find maps here. Another one that is Great Northern says from Mullen West Broadway, although I've heard that they might actually only be doing this section, which we need to talk to them about, because Costco is also is renovating and taking over some of this area, and so they might end up having to do a bunch of the street work. So I don't know the Great Northern is happening, but I think that staff will be on board with removing one side of parking. Likely that west side, again, by the box stores, leaving the parking on the side where there's apartments and kind of quicker in and out type land uses. Are you guys still in agreement there? It seems like you were from the last meeting.
Yeah, the Great Northern.
American Way, from Reserve to Great Northern. There is currently no recommendation on that, again, because there isn't, even though it is a decent street to get into Pleasant View over here. There's currently no signal here, and it would be very, very difficult to cross Reserve as a bicyclist. One of the things that we would want to see is a crosswalk likely put back in here.
As well as on Great Northern.
Yeah.
Poser.
Ben, sorry, just one thing. Just based on what from the summit with the for the visually handicapped little bubble things, it was amazing to find out how ineffective they can be when they're aligned improperly.
Yeah.
So for the crosswalks here, we're going to make sure that those are aligned so that they actually are sending them in the right direction.
This would not be redoing curb work. This would not be redoing.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I've just been seeing so many places around town. I'm going, oh my gosh, it's one of those.
Yeah, no, look at it. This one's on an angle too. Really, there should be one here.
Exactly.
There should be one here to go across, but that isn't how it was done.
Yeah.
So someday, hopefully that will all get repaired, but it's not through just a resurfacing project.
Before we get too far away from England, I guess I'm a little confused about the England Reserve intersection and how that was going to be restriped.
Yeah, and so that does bring up the question that Robin had from last time. So, in the thought here, it's that my thought was having the Sharrow and the left-hand side of the right turn lane. And I know that you guys had the question of, should we put it in the through lane instead? So there's a couple things there. One is that this placement is authorized in the NACTO and ASHTO guidelines for bike facilities. And one of the benefits, or there's a few benefits. One is that it lines you up closer with where you'd be receiving over here as a bicyclist. Although this intersection's kind of way offset anyway. Another is that, as you can see here, there's much more through traffic than there is right turn traffic. And so the idea is that you could get up to the intersection and when the light turns green, get to go. Whereas if you're waiting back here, you might, not only are you sitting in exhaust, but you might even have to wait through the cycle for that if you don't get all the way through.
Yeah, but you're going to have some impatient drivers behind you.
Yeah.
That still wouldn't preclude somebody from hopping into the left-hand turn lane as a vehicle, bicycle, and turning left from that lane.
Yeah,
So-
no, not at all. All it does is it lets people in this lane know that a cyclist is within their rights to come up to the line at the left-hand side of this. And go straight. And it also, you can see here that like the scrubbing on the concrete, there's like I mean, maybe this is rasterization, but this looks like a less worn area. So that all these right turners are kind of missing that space anyway. So that would be my recommendation, although we've done it and we've done it this way at 3rd and Reserve and at 3rd and Russell, where we put the Sharrow in the right turn only lane for a through movement. So there's precedence here as well. I'm totally open to a thought that, we want to do it differently at this intersection, but that was just my immediate thought, was that would be where the Sharrow would go.
I guess my concern there is make the entrance then into England on the west side of Reserve. That's a very narrow spot. They're going to have to merge with any straight through traffic coming out of that center lane.
Yeah, we have over 15 feet there.
Well, since they'd be essentially changing lanes, I mean, it's up to the cyclist then to be somebody who's merging into the traffic lane to find the open space in the same lane.
Yeah. Again, it seems like there isn't room for parking, so we could even stripe a bike lane in the westbound direction here through all of this.
It's wider than I thought it was, so yeah, not as much of a problem as I thought.
It gets narrow kind of immediately after this is probably what you're thinking of.
Yeah.
Well, this becomes actual bike lane right here.
Yeah.
Just west of Tina.
You've got so many places to turn right after you cross Reserve into going into REI and all those places there.
There are multiple driveways.
Personally, and this is just me, I feel a lot better being out in the lanes. Like this is so much fewer chances for inadvertent right hooks. People looking to get into the parking lots and the trees and everything else.
I was just going to say, I think that the folks living just behind, what is that, like the REI and the Ross would appreciate the bike lane for that one section of England. I know it gets really hairy just as a driver, that one section, exiting from TJ Maxx REI and trying to get back on Reserve. There's a lot of just enough conflict between cars only. I would be nervous doing that in a bike right now.
What I don't understand is why people don't just make the right turn out of here and then go around the roundabout and come back.
It'd probably be faster.
I'll keep that.
Sometimes.
It would be faster and safer, but
Yeah. Well, you could do it like they do by the good food stores, just put the delineators up there and say, do it.
yeah. But then there's no other, you can't come from this neighborhood and enter that, then you wouldn't be able to make a left turn.
Yeah.
We on to Union Pacific, or more questions about England?
Nope. Anybody?
So Union Pacific, we found out it is a private street, but that there's a public easement on it and a mutual agreement between all of these people. It appears that this developed first, I think, and then these did, and so these own the road but have given a private agreement to these people, and the city is on the hook for maintaining Union Pacific. So this is one that does have a signal, but it doesn't go anywhere on this side, really, yet. So I think the recommendation here is no recommendation for now, but that it's one that we'd like to keep an eye on. I actually met someone from the health department at the conference who uses Union Pacific when she bikes to work downtown. And I said, well, would bike lanes help you there? And she was like, probably not. So, because she has kids and doesn't feel like bike lanes do enough to actually make it safe for them to go. And so, yeah, and as long as there's this center turn lane, I don't think that there's room for bike lanes in this stretch. Yeah, doesn't look like it. South 6th, 5th, 6th is still on hold. We're pursuing, I believe that we are pursuing MDT approval. And so I'm not sure when it's going to get discussed by council, but the idea is that get all of the ducks in a row with MDT and then have council approve it. This stretch, this one block or two blocks of partial mill and overlay will not impact, even if they put down some new water dash lines to stripe out the lanes, that will not impact our ability to do the 5th, 6th project afterwards. Turner Street on the north side. This is the tough one. So this is one that Turner just barely meets the threshold for collector. It's over 1,000 cars per day. It is our truck route through there. And it's one that, because it's a collector, it triggers the complete streets policy. But it's one that, as a former Northside resident, I feel like it would be very difficult to justify parking removal on this stretch without sidewalks and without, with no sidewalk and no real connective destination. Scott Street doesn't really have bike lanes until you get a little further south, and there's no bike lanes on Warden or North 5th. But I'm all ears if the board thinks differently. It sounded like Corey was recommending parking removal on one side.
Weren't we going to kind of send them, if they're coming west on Turner, is to move them a little farther north before they get over to Scott Street? Or?
Well, that was the other piece, is that Palmer Street is considered the through bikeway in the North Reserve Scott Street master plan that MRA put together.
Yeah.
Because that includes building Palmer as a road through the north end of this park and connecting over here and connecting up, and so that would be the bike route. Now, if Palmer ever sees that much vehicle traffic that it would need facilities, parking would have to be removed from both sides of the street on Palmer because it's pretty narrow.
Now, I'd like to refer back to the Northside Greenway route, which is, if you're coming from the north and heading south, coming south on Scott to Turner, Turner to Waverly, Waverly south to the bike trail.
Mm-hmm.
And that would remove the necessity of bike lanes on Turner at this point. If that could be, and it's not part of this project, I'm sure, but it's something that would be somewhat different to do and might be more amenable, is the stop signs currently on Waverly have Waverly stopping frequently for the other cross streets. Whereas if those stop signs were switched to the east-west streets and let Waverly be the through, then cyclists would have a good shot from Scott to Turner, down to the trail, and over to the north
Yeah.
Bike Ped Bridge.
Stoddard, we'd probably have no problem switching them. Cooley might be a different story, since that is, even though Turner is the truck route through this neighborhood, Cooley is the car route for all of, let me zoom out a little bit. So any of these residents who are driving come over the bridge, and then Cooley's the first one they can make a right on. So asking them to stop at that first block, we just have to see if that can work. Maybe it's just a good candidate for traffic calming.
Good circling?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that would be beneficial.
It would also help signal to everybody what they're supposed to do there, to tell them that there's a trail a block and a half away that they could get to.
If that could, again, become an official greenway
Yeah.
for that area.
So that's one that I'm going to look at further with the planning staff and with the engineering staff. So what I'm hearing is that we should at least facilitate bicycle through movement for this first block, as part of the north side greenway route. And we should figure out what our pitch to council is about the rest of this, and why, if we are recommending not adding bike facilities at this time, why not, and what does that look like?
If that is a designated truck route, so I'd keep cyclists away from that as much as possible as a truck route. It also doesn't really get you to a good destination. Your better route to the trail is down Waverly.
Yep. And if you live on off of any of these other streets, you'll just stay on Scott. Most people will just stay on Scott and then turn on to whatever street they live on. What's that?
When they're driving.
Or biking. I mean, again, Scott, in my mind, Scott is more important to have bike lanes on it, but it currently doesn't.
Yeah.
Beginning at Cooley, Cooley North, it does not have bike lanes anymore.
Ben, if you're coming down Scott Street Bridge on your bicycle, how far are you going to naturally coast before you start having to work at it again?
Depends on how fast your bike is and how fast you get going, but
Probably Charlotte.
I could pedal really hard and stop pedaling kind of right near the bottom of the hill somewhere about here, and I could make it up to, I used to live on this end of Palmer, I can make it here on Palmer and to this intersection without having to pedal again.
Well, that's how far the bike lanes need to go then.
But I was going really slow and I was trying to maximize how far can I go without having, putting my foot down, It's not like I'm actually cruising that far. But yeah, no, parking on this side of the street, especially when you're coming down at the same speed as a vehicle is, and then you're being run into the back of a parked car, that needs to change, but this project does not do that. Scott Street, south of here. So this one has gotten a little more confusing recently, just by some observations that I've made on site. And so staff and the board seem to like parking removal from the east side of the street, especially as we get down to here. But there's a couple things. One is that the parking there has been notched out. And so if that gets replaced with bike lane, you're actually having to merge more when you get to the intersection than you would if that parking was kept and the bike lane was part of the through movement.
There's not enough room with that pedestrian aisle there for a bike lane.
Well, the bike lane would end right before you got to this, but currently, let me flip this a little bit. So see how this line stays straight and this one bends? Basically, this one would bend and this one would stay straight if we kept parking on that side and moved it from this side. Another thought is that in the downhill direction, we really don't need we don't need a bike lane as we approach the T, because you're either going to go left or you're going to go right. Bringing a bike lane into the intersection does not help you at all, because you can't go straight here. And so you'd have to merge at some point here. So in my mind, even though it is important to have a bike lane in the uphill, I'm a little less convinced that that's also where the parking should be removed.
So we're looking at keeping parking on the east side and then having a bike lane next to the parking, and then on the downhill portion, just not having a bike lane or share it, or what?
Well, if we remove parking on the and so that also, then it puts the door zone bike lane in the uphill direction where you're going slower, and so your likelihood of being doored and having that be a problem is much lower. And if we remove parking on that side, then we could just get a bike lane, a curbside bike lane on the other side. Now, if we keep parking on both sides and add a bike lane in the uphill direction and a shallow in the downhill, there's room in the curb to curb, but every lane would be at its minimums. The parking lanes would be at 7 feet, the bike lane would be at 5, and the travel lanes would be at 10.
No.
And we know that that causes issues. So another thought that I had is, what if the outside of the approach to the roundabout and the approach to the intersection, there was no double yellow, and instead we look at this for advisory bike lanes. So we keep the parking on both sides and just narrow the travel distance, the travel lane width. Does everyone remember what?
I think we'd be able to educate people about advisory bike lanes. I mean, I don't know what the traffic volume is there, but
So it would look something like that. The traffic volume is low enough that the double yellow is not required.
it certainly makes people think more when they're driving.
Be a good place for that experiment, I think.
Yeah, I'd be ready to try that there.
Yeah, just losing a center like that leads to traffic confusion, I would think.
So I want to talk to, again, I need to talk to engineering and planning a little bit more about this one, because it's not as, to me, it's no longer as simple as, oh yeah, let's just get rid of parking on the east side, run the bike lanes in both directions. Even though it would be very easy to just take it away against this whole block face here.
Just looking at that last block, north of Broadway, I can't imagine much parking in that area. You got, on one side you got a huge parking lot, on the other side you got a couple businesses.
Yeah, this is all getting redeveloped in the near future.
Okay.
This is going to be a big housing project, I believe, and I'm not sure what happens here.
Well, they should be.
The housing project will have off-street parking required.
It will.
People come to party.
Oh, yeah.
Old Fort Road. This is one that we kind of all said, as much as we'd love to see bike lanes on that street, maybe we can roll that into the South Avenue reconstruction instead of this particular overlay. This is the one block between Dearborn and South Ave. This is right here where we're talking. Kind of heavy on-street parking usage right now. Mary Avenue, the complete streets exception was granted. South Avenue would be putting bike lanes back. Garrett Street. This is one, the bike facilities master plan, this is one that goes straight up and down the hill. The section that we're looking at is only in the flat area. I think it goes to Garland. So this is about maybe, yeah, approaching about a third of a mile. Yeah, potentially could have bike lanes. That would require parking removal, and so I didn't quite get your Just says same as before in bike facilities master plan on the sheet from your comments, so I didn't know what that meant. Did that mean that you would want to see them there?
Can you remind us whether there's sidewalk there and whether it's
There's
curbside?
Not on both sides of the street. So there's really narrow curbside sidewalk here and then nothing on this side.
Is there any kind of guidance or information about what would be better to remove parking from the side that has or doesn't have the sidewalk?
I don't know, I can definitely look into that.
Because it seems like that could be a consideration. My hunch is that the downhill side, or I guess it's flat at that point, but somebody could have started taking off and probably still be coasting there if they were on downhill. But that the line of cars might be a nice thing for the people on the sidewalk.
Yeah.
So that would be my thought.
Realizing that it apparently is a collector, and we would like to see bike lanes on collectors as much as possible. However, my thought is that considering destinations, the alternative over one block east, South Reserve, or actually it's 2 blocks east, sorry, is a much better bike route as far as I'm concerned. It works much easier. The intersection with 39th, if you bring the map down just a little bit so we can see 39th a little better. There we go. That intersection with Garrett and 39th, it gets very close to
Where people are coming out of here.
Garrett Road and the entrance into Walmart. The preference for Reserve also is the school is over there. And you've got access off of Reserve, South Reserve, just south of the school. You've got access to the South Hills Trail System,
Yeah, through here.
which makes a great route to move on east, getting off of 39th. I've been taking that frequently as opposed to taking 39th down when heading out for a ride on Miller Creek Road. So I would not be strongly in favor of bike lanes on Garrett, other than the fact that it is a collector and we should try to do that when possible.
Okay, well, again, I'll meet again with engineering and planning and see what their take is.
As noted, consider outreach carefully when reaching out to the neighborhood there. It's an area that has significant issues.
I'm recalling that a year or two ago, there was some news stories about pedestrian incidents related to that school in the intersection near the Safeway. Have any, I mean, obviously I've heard nothing come up, so maybe things are better now.
That was repainted, 39th was repainted last year.
So one of the things that we did is we removed this crosswalk and walk up, and so we added the crosswalk over on this side, because what was happening is that cars waiting to make this left turn were we're going past this. People were crossing, and then they were hidden by cars waiting to turn left there, and then getting hit this way. And so by putting it back here, it allows more queue room for those left turners, and so these people are much more visible. We haven't heard a report since of there being any problems. We acknowledge that a whole bunch of ADA work should happen here. The other thing that stinks is that the school is on this side, and this is where the sidewalk is. There's no sidewalk there, so even though they have to cross here, they then have to cross here to get down to the school. But it still is better than it was.
There is a bit of a problem with traffic for parent pickup of children at the school at the end of the school day for cyclists and others, but that's not much can be done about that.
Yeah.
Not much other location for parents to be able to pick up kids there.
So Hillview Way, we put in a plan, or put in a request to restripe this a little bit differently, adding a bike lane in the southbound direction, a buffer, and then the travel lane. And here, I think what we ended up doing, I think there was room to fit a bike lane and take a foot or two off of the through lane, and then 2 or 3 feet off the right turn lane and bring a bike lane here. Same thing on this side, have a bike receiving lane, a buffer, and this. On this side, all we did was recommend adding sharrows to the left side of this right turn only lane, because these lanes are narrower than these lanes are. And so to bump them out and find the width to add a full bike lane in between here, it puts the double yellow over, and then it changes the offsets with how people are getting across, and it just seemed like a much heavier lift. I think that it would be doable in some jurisdictions, but needing MBT approval and Kevin signing off on 30 or 35 mile an hour traffic going through this, they didn't want to have to also move sideways while you're going through the intersection, which is somewhat understandable. So it's kind of a compromise, and essentially it would bring, with the exception of the bike lane which ends here in the westbound direction, we'd then have, this would be a major intersection that would have bike facilities brought up nearly entirely to all legs of the intersection.
So southbound on Russell, then you're going to say just the RTO would have sharrows?
Yep.
To take you through. What about, but the northbound will have a bike lane in the left side of the right turn lane?
Left side of the right turn lane would have a bike lane.
Okay, why not just put sharrows in or something?
Well, because this is all getting restriped with epoxy. It's all worn. They did temporary striping after the construction project. It's all worn out. And so the reason that this is an issue is that they're putting together an epoxy striping project to do this long term. This striping is all good, and to redo this would need to erase all of these lines and then add project costs to the striping.
What about the westbound southwest ticket there, that right turn lane? We can put sharrows there?
Potentially, I don't know that we can do it as part of this project, but I brought it up to Kevin as like and this is a good place to do that as well.
Okay.
Do the sidewalks or the crosswalks get restriped as part of that?
Yep. The Scott Street Water Project, any chance to widen the road and add bike lane? I'm still pushing for that. I'm not sure. That would be one where, again, I would welcome personally, I would welcome a recommendation to the Public Works Committee to consider that.
What section of Scott is that?
This is north of the bridge. We need sidewalk and bike lane there, is my understanding. I guess there's curbside on both sides, but it really is not a comfortable walking environment with how much heavy truck traffic there is. And I'm not exactly sure how far up they're going. It might just be till Palmer, and then they're going to stub in this way for that future road. And then the question here, do mill and overlay trigger ADA? Many segments are missing sidewalks and curb ramps. I don't have a good answer for that. I don't really know. I know that in some jurisdictions it does. Here, we say that it doesn't. To me, that I would direct you to inquire of John Wilson and of the Public Works Committee what their take is on that. Do you know who asked that question? Was it Peter?
No. I missed that COW. But I guess I'll withhold my opinion.
So that's the end. Again, I don't even know if all of these are going to happen this year. That's just what's on the list, and so that's what I'm tasked with applying the complete streets policy to. And so I'm glad to hear that we're all more or less in agreement with where we'd like to get facilities and which ones are higher priorities than others, and how we'd like to direct people through pavement markings.
So my understanding was that you would appreciate a recommendation for the Scott Street water main
I think that it would be worth, inquiring of Public Works Committee, what their thoughts are on that.
Okay.
And if there's an opportunity to combine water, sewer projects with roadway, with complete streets projects.
But I guess what I'm leading up to is, other than that, just our basic discussions that we've had is enough for you to take back to engineering now?
On all of the striping and,
Right.
on those, definitely.
Okay.
But the others, I guess I would like, those kind of bigger picture policy type questions, those are above me.
Right. Okay. Any other comments with respect to any of the project lists? Okay. General comments and announcements of the board, I guess is where we're moving to. Gene?
Referring back to the Bike Walk Alliance Montana, I went on the website after getting back from the summit, and I forget where I clicked to get to it, but there was a very interesting thing, is that they have actually an incident report page or aspect to it. It seems to be very underused. The only two things I saw were in Bozeman, I guess, but it's a thing where you can say, did somebody pull out, or did somebody make an illegal turn, or did a bicycle run a stop sign or whatever. So it's under-advertised and underutilized. I think it might be, it doesn't really have anything to do with Missoula. I just wanted to mention that, if you do have something, even though it's not part of Ben's office or anything, that apparently BOAM is wanting to keep track of it, so it's there.
I've got in my City Digest a form or notice to comment on a dam removal for Rattlesnake Creek, and I just wanted to mention that I think the deadline was a week or two from now, and you can find that on the city's website, but that seemed like an opportunity to comment on, bicycle pedestrian issues, because that's a popular recreation area. So anyway.
Single track that goes along there?
It's up to you what you want to comment, Gene. I'm just letting you know that's out there. Yeah, because I know that some of those of us on the board here are interested in those type of things. So that's out there, and it's an opportunity to comment.
Great. Jeff?
I wonder if I don't know if it's too late or not, but Ben, maybe do you know, are bicycle facilities being included in the airport expansion?
What do you mean by bike facilities? Like parking?
Yeah.
Long-term parking?
I was mostly thinking that would, something that would be nice out there for long-term bike parking would be a cover and maybe some type of a locker sort of system.
So I've been working with them on lockers. The issue is TSA, and so they need to be see-through, so that people can't put bombs in them, which, it's a hoop that I'll jump through because it's better than what's out there now, but what I said back to him, I was like, but if I hide something, I can park my car closer than this bike locker is, and you can't see in my car. What if I blow you up in my car? They didn't like that. So, logic is, it doesn't always work. So, but one of the concerns I've heard is that people don't want to store their nice bike in a locker that you can see into. And so how do we get there? And I don't know what the answer is. But the airport itself is very open to the idea. And in fact, today, I never realized this until recently, but here, I'll show you where. Over on, over on this side of the airport, there's like a little stand, and you can work on your bike and put it together there if you like fly with your bike in a box.
No, I was just thinking about that, saying you put in a little bicycle assembly thing. People flying with their bikes and get them out of the box. And yeah, cool.
Conveniently next to a mountain lion stop.
Yep. So yeah, thanks for the heads up, and it's something that, once we had that issue with TSA, I kind of backed off it for a while, but now that they're pushing forward with their redesign, it's a good time to bring it back.
And the thing about lockers would not just be for bikes, but for like clothes. Like there's all the time when I bike there in January, flying to Texas or Georgia or something like that, where you show up with all this cold weather gear that you don't need at your destination. It would be nice to be able to leave it.
Oh, it's like an indoor locker as well as your bike locker. Okay.
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah, that's a great idea.
Danny?
Ben, one thing that I think we talked about a while ago was the budget for striping for the city. And I was wondering if you had any update on that or anything to say or anything that we could do if we're interested in, commenting on that.
So we haven't started putting together the budget yet for next year, but it's happening sometime soon. So my guess is that next meeting or June's meeting will be an opportunity to kind of present and comment on that. This board, I believe, the past 2 years has supported a budget request for more money for the striping crew, whether that's people or paint or both, is kind of up to how they use it. But I will send around, or maybe Bob can send around that recommendation, but it basically said that if they had a modest budget increase, they'd be able to do a lot more crosswalks and bike symbols and bike lanes and safety projects, painting the curb yellow near intersections where people can't park, and so making it safer for people to cross the street, that sort of thing. That was a lot of the reasoning behind it. I think that request is going to come through again, and so you'll likely be able just to reaffirm your previous recommendation. But Chad and I are also contemplating a new pavement markings fund, essentially, that we would do slightly higher. We'd have a certain amount of money that would get us maybe 1 or 2 routes each year, and we'd be able to do higher quality symbols in there that would last a lot longer than they're currently lasting.
Great thoughts.
But I anticipate at the May meeting, a lot of our discussion will be about asking you for support for budget requests that we're planning on making.
Great. I look forward to that. This doesn't relate directly to Missoula, but it's the extended area. The Bitterroot Trail Preservation Alliance is trying to move forward with a little more outreach and activity. Rather than having a big ride this summer, we've gotten some board members to start with some little exploratory rides. So one of our members is doing a series of 3 shorter rides. One is a Florence to Stevensville, May 6th. Another will be a Stevensville East Side Loop on June 2nd. And another will be Victor to Woodside on June 23rd. If you want a copy of this for information, or you can also get this information on the Bitterroot Trail Preservation Alliance website. And Bitterroot Trail Preservation Alliance is attempting to be a centralized calendar event site for things happening on and near the Bitterroot Trail for the future. So we're trying to keep an events page active and get notification up of various things that are happening there. Currently coming up, of course, is the Lions Ride for Sight and the Watson's Children Bike for Shelter coming up. I don't have the dates offhand, but those are coming up soon in early June or late May. So things to watch for, and hopefully will be an active site. That's all I have. We don't have listed our next meeting, but as Ben mentioned, our May board meeting may be on the 8th rather than the 1st. So watch for that. Next COW meeting would be the last Tuesday of this month, whatever date that is. Nobody has their calendar out. 4/24. Yeah. For the COW. Hopefully see everyone there. Thank you all.
Thanks.
All right.
We're adjourned.